Welcome back, everyone, to NeuroAlchemy, where science meets soul and where healing is understood as a nonlinear, multidimensional journey. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Young. Here on NeuroAlchemy, we slow conversations down on purpose. We define terms clearly, we name complexity without overwhelming. And we approach healing as a multidimensional, nonlinear process that honors both the brain and the lived human experience. Because clarity creates safety, and safety opens the door to deeper insight, choice, and healing. Today's conversation is about returning to trust. Trust in the body, trust in sensation, trust after fear, trust after overwhelm. I'm joined by Cori Myka, a teacher who guides adults through the deeply embodied experience of learning to swim, not just as a skill, but also as a nervous system journey. Her work invites us to rethink fear, safety, confidence, and how the body learns trust again. As always, you guys, you're invited to listen gently. Please pause when you need to. Nothing here in this space is about force or perfection. Take a breath. You don't need to decide anything today. Cori, we are so grateful you're here. Welcome to NeuroAlchemy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we begin, I always like to just start by saying, how are you doing today? How are you arriving, whether that's physically, emotionally, mentally, or energetically?
Well, I'll say I'm showing up with deep appreciation for your intro because prior to your intro, I was showing up rushed because I didn't have the link to meet you. So I appreciate it does. Slowing down helps the nervous system. I can feel it. So lots of appreciation. Thank you.
Absolutely. And that's what it's all about, right? It's about pausing and being aware and being in the moment with whatever's going on and participating in that in the best way that we can, regardless of what's going on in our lives today. And for all of you out there, however you're showing up today is enough. And I'd love to start with what called you into teaching adults to swim.
Sure. So I'm sorry, my brain's just going over to the idea of noticing too how quickly the shift happens. Um, so just one more appreciation for that. There's such a concern that it takes a long time to make a shift, but it can be breath. So what called me into teaching adults? I've been in the water, working in the water since I was about 13. And probably my call to the water was earlier than that. But that's when I started volunteering at the pool in the summers. Got me out of summer camp. But my first adult, I was assigned to teach the adults and the parent child classes because you didn't have to be certified to teach those classes, which I find interesting given there's those two groups of people actually require quite a bit of specialization to know how to help those groups of people. But it did so there was something in me that I was seen as a person to be able to connect with those groups, that I took a little more time with them. So that first adult that I had, she was, and I'll put it in air quotes, an old lady. I was like 14, so I don't know, maybe she was 50. But she didn't learn to swim because she grew up in a family that was told it was something that girls couldn't do because it was an athletic thing. And she had to wait until her parents had passed and she was a widow for her to be able to say, but hang on, I see girls and women doing it. Maybe I could do it too. Uh, but she was terrified. And I probably did a very okay job with her because, of course, I didn't really know what I was doing, except for I did listen to her. And I'm sure that made some sort of impact. but she certainly made an impact on me. And through my journey of teaching people to swim, it was the adults who impacted me because I could teach them the physical skills, but I could see, and by my conversations with them, I knew it wasn't landing, wasn't they could do the function, but they didn't feel like a swimmer. So this is what I found very interesting and wanted to take time and did take time to learn a new way to work with them. So they not only could look like a swimmer, they could feel like a swimmer. And so that's really why I've been in that work and continue to be in that work.
And as you began working with adults, where did you start noticing fear? And where did you start witnessing breakthrough?
Well, I would notice fear, again, going back to these stories of somebody being able to swim across the pool, and I'd say, "How was it?" And they'd have a deer in the headlights look on their face that says, "I have no idea." And so that is where I started identifying, oh, that is about fear. It's not about form or function. They are working to get to the other side. If I can only get to, quote, safety at the other side, that means getting to the wall, getting out, then I won't be in danger. But it left this big hanging question of what happens in the middle. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the second part of your question. Perhaps it was about how we started overcoming it.
Yeah, just so where you started noticing fear, where you started noticing breakthroughs. I think one of the things people underestimate is how vulnerable it is to learn something new as an adult. So I'm also curious what feels misunderstood about how adults learn embodied skills like swimming.
Yeah. So the first place, so we started rolling back. So it's like you can see fear in the big places, like jumping into the deep end. That's kind of obvious. But so then we start rolling back the process to see, well, when did the fear start? Didn't just start with jumping in. Okay. It started with going to the deep end. It started with floating, performance anxiety. Started with, we keep rolling back. It starts with walking out on a pool deck and smelling the smells of the pool that take us back to maybe some negative memories, right? So we keep having to kept rolling back with folks in an inquiry, right? In conversations with folks to be able to kind of see, where does it start? It starts before they even get there. And so that's the place where we really then started seeing breakthroughs is when we allow people enough space to come back and back and back till they find the place. Where do we go from being calm to not calm? And we take care of ourselves in that place. And I think this is what goes universally for learning anything, learning the harmonica. There's not a lot of danger to learning the harmonica, but my brain, like, whoa, kind of wants to freak out about it. So, giving myself, like we did in the beginning of this episode, just space to slow it down, to give myself a little love, take care of that tender part that thinks I should already know how to play the harmonica before I pick it up even, and really take care there. This is where then we can start making forward steps because we've really started at our true place and we're starting with taking care of our emotional self just as much or more than the physical step of learning to swim or harmonica or fill in the blank with whatever you might be learning.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to acknowledge that, especially when you know about yourself, because I'm that way too. I want everything yesterday. When I learn a new skill, I want to have already mastered that, but learning doesn't actually happen like that. I think it's important that we acknowledge to ourselves, acknowledge that consciousness inside that wants you to have it yesterday. But I've tried like having a chat with that part. Like, oh, really? You think we should have already done that? That's interesting. Well, how about we do this little next step consistently first, right? And get the buy in with that, that inner consciousness. And I'd love your reflections on this, Corey. How does presence in water mirror emotional healing? Because from the outside, it looks like swimming lessons, right? But what I hear in your work is something so much deeper.
Hmm. Yeah, from the outside, it looks like, swimming lessons. From the outside, it looks like that's what people are asking for, but they're again, by listening to people, we're hearing, "Well, yeah, I want to learn to swim so that I'm safe." And we sort of open that up, like, "Okay, so what does it mean to be safe?" There's physical safety in terms of the water. I'm not when I'm playing the harmonica, not too much physical safety issues at hand, but there's a physical piece of that. I need to be able to get air easily anytime I want. And then there's that emotional safety, which is in that ease and anytime I want, those sorts of pieces of the equation. When we are feeling anxious or worried or just that nervous system is really highly activated, it prevents us from having access to the physical skills that one needs to keep their physical body safe as well. So I can't, I might know that I need to put my feet on the floor so I can lift my face out and get air. But if I'm stiff as a board because I'm scared stiff, I literally do not have the capacity to get my feet underneath me. So that tuning into the emotional piece is so important so that you can access the physical piece. And then also there's this other layer of, as you talked about, how you speak to yourself in those moments, right? That we don't want to tell ourselves the shoulds. It should be different, but really loving up those pieces of ourselves that are just trying to protect us and keep us safe.
Absolutely. On this show, we talk a lot about nervous system safety. You mentioned helping people regulate in those fear states. How do you recognize when someone isn't safe inside themselves yet? And for listeners who may not know this language, I would love to slow it down for a moment. So, safety in the nervous system doesn't mean absence of challenge, right? It means the presence of enough support.
I love that. I haven't heard that. And that's exactly what we do. We talk about creating a container of safety so that you do have, just as you said, you have enough supports there. Um, and I let people know in terms of swimming that people who are swimmers of every level do this. And it's important and essential for every level of swimmer. So I am a really excellent swimmer. I swim in open water, I swim in cold water, I can swim distances. But when I go to do it, like um last year I did a swim out to an island. I live in a place where there's these islands and we swam across an ocean channel to get to this island. I had kayak support. I had a swim buoy on me that makes me easily visible. It went with a group. I swam at a different speed so that our group could stay together, right? I had all of these physical supports so that I could be calm enough emotionally to know, okay, there's a plan, there's a backup plan. I trust the plan. Even when I got into the water, I felt, into the water. Okay, maybe it's too cold for the wetsuit that I had on, or does this, I allowed space to check in. Is this really, even though I got here and we're all here, is this really the right time for me to swim across this channel, right? I checked in emotionally with that before I went. And there's, yeah, a little like, oh, I haven't done it before, excitement sort of feeling, but I did take time to slow that down a little bit to allow the scared part of myself to participate. Is she ready? Yeah, she was ready. So we did it. So that was me at a high level of swimming, creating a container of safety, both physically and emotionally. And that's what we do for our very beginners, too.
And that's absolutely something, I would encourage people to have as a daily practice, just like you're describing. Like, let that be part of just how you do life with yourself, is to create those containers of safety to check in with ourselves to see how things are going, to be loving, as you mentioned, to be present. Corey, how would you describe what safety feels like in the body and what danger feels like?
Well, I mean, the name of what our work, we say calm within Adult Swim. So there is a calmness of energy, grounded. These are words that we use, centered, present, at home. We do feel at home in our body. It is not up in the thinking part of our brain. That part of our brain will offer and be because we are human, we're not going to get away from the thinking part of our brain, but we're able to go from the thinking part to actually feeling into the body versus we have this sense of being outside of ourselves. We literally see it in the water when people are calm, their eyes are kind of downcast, their eyes, their bodies at ease. When they're in danger, they're outside of themselves and they're literally looking at the wall. It changes their whole body posture. It actually makes it more difficult to swim to the wall when they're looking at the wall. And so it has this externalness to it. We might notice it in the category of what will others think about this, right? The judgment side versus a being side. I'm in playing that harmonica versus this is terrible, right? The evaluative part of it. So it has this I keep kind of making myself into myself and opening myself out, looking out into the world for those dangers.
Contraction versus expansion.
There we go. That's the word. Yes. Yes.
How does the nervous system respond differently to water when someone feels supported versus maybe when they feel alone in it?
So we are very, very attracted to water. And when we teach people, we teach them in warm water because it is easier for them
Mm.
to have that expansion feeling versus a tight feeling. And they should keep losing your questions today for some reason. Sorry. There's
You know what? You know what? It just means it wasn't meant to be answered, dear.
okay. Yeah. I don't know why I lost it. The
Well,
nervous system.
yeah. What helps people soften back into their breath, into sensation, into trust?
Curiosity, I think, is a big piece of that. Allowing space for our curiosity. You know, every time somebody does an activity in the water, we get curious. How did that feel? What did they notice? Not in a, we don't ask people, was it right or wrong? Was it good or bad? It's not these binaries. It's just open curiosity that helps us soften into the experience.
And I want to name something here for everyone as well. I don't, this isn't about pushing through your fear. That's not what we're talking about at all. What we're talking about here is meeting your fear with presence, and even more specifically, with loving presence. You wrote that skill building becomes identity shifting, and I just love that so much. What changes in a person when they succeed in the water?
There's a ripple effect. This is early on in my days of doing this work when I was even sort of seeking my own personal transformation. I remember thinking and even saying to students, "Oh, it's so neat that you have something so concrete that you're afraid of, that you have this thing very specifically to be able to work through so you can lovingly go through this process because it's the same in any other area of your life. And so they get to, and this is usually learning to swim is a big one for people because there is a physical truth to people do lose their lives in water. So there is, and the fact that we can't breathe when we're doing part of it, it has a very high stakes. It presents very high stakes in that way. So it's a really big one for people to be able to play with. and to discover themselves with and journey with. So we do see big transformations in their personal life too, because wow, it's so huge for them to be able to go through it. And the more they do it with this tender care, and the other thing that we do encourage people to do is to look in other areas of their lives of how they have overcome fear, of how powerful they are in some other area that maybe they're not giving themselves credit for because it's now an easy thing for them. But we build confidence from confidence. And there are places that we have, it might be a very tiny nugget, and that's okay. We can take a little grain of sand of confidence and bring it into our swimming journey, that sense of confidence, then now we can take that into what other life journey that we want to have as well.
Success isn't just technical, it lands in the body. How do repetition, gentle exposure, and paced progression help to build new wiring?
We are I'm sure this goes universally, but we see this particularly in our clients. They live in systems that they're very rewarded for academic pushing or performance pushing. And um, when they learn a new way in terms of that tuning in way, um, it makes just a profound difference for them. But they do need to, we have to be in this mindfulness piece of recognizing this is the key to their success is this coming back into the body and coming back into taking care, because it's very easy to slip back into this other way of being that's very highly rewarded in our society, but it burns people out and it gets people I see in the water, people do drown from it because they're more concerned about getting to destination. Let's swim over to there. Like my story with the island, if I was more concerned about getting to the island instead of tuning to the process, I could have been in a lot of danger. But because I was more attuned to the process, it was a very successful, even though we had some things that went very awry. We did have to use that kayak support on the way back because the tides changed while we were out there.
Ooh.
But, because we were paying attention to the process, it's a wonderful, successful story.
Where do play, curiosity, and laughter accelerate learning?
What we see is it's a great integration. It's a great integration. So one of the most controversial things I ever posted on a swim teacher's Facebook group was I was teaching a student for an hour and a half. That's controversial to begin with, that I have hour and a half private lessons. Um, but I was teaching a student and we played games the entire time. My gosh, people just were very upset about this idea. How could you waste their time? But I put it on there on purpose because it was the best time that we ever could have played or we ever could have learned in. It was such an integration of all of the small pieces. I had to start with other pieces first in terms of going underwater because we're playing games like picking stuff up off the floor. We have a little torpedo toy that we throw to each other, so it's an underwater catch game.
Learning is easier when things are fun.
Yes, it's so much joyful. Yeah, they just like, all right, now I'm not so worried about all the things that I'm worried about. So they had such a good time. So it's so integral. It's so integral that it's even one of the things that we say. We'll say, we can put our face in the water if it sounds like fun. And we really want people to answer that question. If it's yes, then great, put your face in the water. If it's no, it just tells us there's a worry, there's a concern, there's a question. Perfect. It can now be revealed and we can find answers to those and then ask again. Does it sound like fun? If it's yes, great. If it's no, no problem. We just have more information to work with.
More opportunities for learning.
Hmm.
And I'd love to hear about moments that have stayed with you. Maybe times when someone didn't just learn how to swim, but they reclaimed themselves.
I think this is where I was gonna go earlier one of your earlier questions. I have heard on many occasions, "I learned to swim, and I broke up with that person. I spoke up to my boss. I changed my job. Um" yeah, this sense of empowerment, and not just empowerment to, like, jump into the deep end, right? But empowerment that comes from a calm, internal, powerful place. So yeah, we've had many a time that sorry, partner that hasn't been treating too kindly. You're out the door now. No more tolerance for this.
It's such a powerful reminder that the body remembers. The body also can relearn as well. If water were a healer, what would you say that it teaches us?
It teaches us what comes to mind here is to be still. But also, what comes to mind is to be with. The greatest preventer of us being able to be successful at swimming is when we're trying to overcome the water, overpower, to be so in control that we actually, it doesn't work. But it's when we be with the water, be it if it's moving water, we have to be with the moving water. If water is moving, most of the time, you're not gonna be able to overpower it, you have to work with it. There's buoyancy properties, you can try and overpower them, how the buoyancy properties are, but it's a lot of effort for not a lot of reward. It's being with the properties of the water. So, when we do that, we find this is where people when you look at swimming and you see, "Oh, it looks so easy." It's because the people who have captured this idea of being able to be physically and emotionally with the water and to meet up with it.
For listeners who don't have access to a pool right now, how can people practice nervous system safety outside of the water as well?
I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with that container of safety and to allow themselves to be able to pause and notice what they're feeling as emotion, feeling as physical sensation, and feeling as body reactions. When we tune in that way, I'll use another anxiety producing one, but give a speech, right? We all kind of know this idea like, I should take a breath before I do that. But that's a way of tuning in to that, how we feel from those multiple levels emotion, body sensations, and reactions. That helps us be able to tend to that nervous system and not just push through it and force our way through it and force our way past it. Because at some point, it's going to give way.
What message do you hope our listeners carry into their bodies after today?
What I hope they carry into their bodies is that taking care of your nervous system isn't just for people who are already successful at something, that is for everybody at every level in every area of our life. That is our job to take care of ourselves. And that includes our nervous system. And that is really an essential key to success in every area.
Where can people learn from you, work with you, or begin their own journey with your work?
So you can find us online in the social media sphere. We're Calm Within Adult Swim. So that you can find us on our YouTube page, which I have lots of videos, and or Instagram, Facebook. You can also come directly to our website, which is adultswimlesson.com. We start with people online with online lessons, so you don't even have to put a swimsuit on to start. And then we go through in person retreats, that sort of thing.
And for everyone out there, of course, as always, I'll be getting her links and I'll be including those in our show notes. We always like to end our conversations with a micro practice invitation, not a big protocol or a perfect routine, just something small and embodied practice that listeners can explore each day over the next week. Cori, what gentle micro practice would you offer?
Yeah, as I was thinking about this, what we ask students to do before they even get into the water is to stop and ask themselves, do I want to? And it oftentimes feels like, well, of course I want to, especially, people are learning to swim in my outdoor pool in the wintertime and they're in their swimming suits next to this
Mhm.
steaming hot pool. They paid all this money. It's like, well, of course, get in, you're here. But I still ask them to just really pause for a moment and ask the most tender part of themselves. Do we want to get in? Are we ready? And if the answer is yes, then they can get in. If the answer is no, it's okay. Give space to that. Oftentimes, just giving ourselves permission and allow ourselves enough space to be able to say, no, I don't have to go in. I can wait a second. Oftentimes, you can't be looking for this, but oftentimes that's enough to have it switch to a yes. But just this gentle asking myself, okay, love, do I want to get in? Are we ready?
And as we close, I'd love to ask you one other question. After hearing this conversation, what do you most hope our listeners will remember about themselves?
I hope that listeners remember that we are more than our performance. How we feel in the time and the space of our doing is as equally or more important than the actual doing. Tending to that emotional part is key and essential and allowed.
Corey, thank you for sharing not only your work, but your heart and being such a gift to all of us. For every listener who's navigating fear, panic, or self doubt, may this conversation remind you that safety can be relearned, confidence can be rebuilt, and your body is not the enemy. Healing is a journey of breath, trust, and return. Full episode links and Corey's information will be in the show notes. If something in today's conversation resonated with you, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to this episode. That's how these conversations travel. That's how the people who need to hear them the most get to hear them. Thank you for joining us on NeuroAlchemy. You are not broken, you are becoming. Bye for now.